It looks like you've fallen asleep. So here's a little something to wake you up. Ah! Wake up!
Make me crazy.
Hi guys! So here's a kind of another episode of the Miss Meyer Show. So this is your first episode, and we are going to be covering chapter 2 in your book, and that is going to be your lesson about historic Indians and the historic Native American population of Louisiana. Now, I hate to use the word Indian because it is not correct. The whole reason that people say Indian is because Columbus came over here and thought he was in India, so he named the Native Americans Indians, which is totally incorrect. However, we do say, some people use the word Indian. I do not. I prefer a Native American, but your textbook calls it actually the first inhabitants, which I like that much better because honestly they were here first and they were not Indians, they were Native Americans in Louisiana. Now, it's like a big shock to some people that Louisiana had Native Americans. For some reason, some people think that Native Americans only lived in places like Oklahoma and Tennessee. I don't know why. It's obviously because they didn't have me as a teacher, right? Let's all believe that. So what we're going to be discussing today in this first Miss Meyer show is your chapter 2, First Inhabitants, and that starts on page 50. Once again, I'm telling you, you do not have a physical textbook. Only I have a physical textbook because I am almost Dr. Meyer. So that's why I've got one, right? All right. Excuse me. So we're going to talk about some cultures of Native Americans in early Louisiana. Now you have to remember that Louisiana was always a climate that was very inhospitable. What does that mean? Well, I'm born and raised in Chalmette, y'all. So any Chalmatians out there, woo! Virtual high five. But I live in Dallas now. Lived here for a while because I came here for my husband's job. Now, when I go back to Louisiana, though, I've been away from it for I come back at least every 2 months. At least I'm there. And you will see me at testing. You will see me. I promise you. So, hey, great things going forward. You get to meet me. And you'd be like, that's the craziest lady I've ever met in my life. But whatever. So anyway, when I get into Louisiana, not too much like in Shreveport, which is really the areas that I go to, but when I get down to New Orleans or Baton Rouge, the first thing that happens to me is that my hair explodes, okay? So here's a picture of me when I was a senior in high school. I mean, my hair was like this big, as you can totally see. So as soon as I get off that plane, because I rarely drive there because I don't drive well, but that's not an indication of who I am as a person. I don't drive well, and that's okay because, that's just, I've always been that way. So whatever. So I take the plane if I can go with a plane, I'm going there. But anyway, get off the plane. The first thing that happens to my hair is just like, whoo. The second thing that happens is that all that humidity that I'm around, it clears my sinuses because I always have really bad sinuses and terrible allergies to the point where I've gotten all these allergy shots and allergy tests, and it was terrible. I refused to go back. I said, no way. But anyway, so as soon as I get to New Orleans, my sinuses clear. I feel like I can breathe again. I'm not sick all the time because I'm always getting sick here in Texas for some reason. It's very dry, very, very dry here. And my hair explodes. It's like serious ridiculousness. So that's just my opinion of how it's kind of inhospitable. Oh, and then I cannot forget that it's like a sauna. So I'm not used to that here. Yeah, we're hot here in Texas, but the humidity of New Orleans is something that I am just not used to. And it takes a really long time getting used to. So the Native Americans that were here first in Louisiana, they were encountering all the same things. Okay, what do we have here in the I guess right around now, truly, we go outside and it's kind of dusk in Louisiana. What are we going to be inundated with? Mosquitoes, like a ton of mosquitoes. We also have, I don't know about other places in Louisiana, but down in Chalmette, New Orleans, we had like monster Godzilla cockroaches that we just could not get rid of, the hurricane seasons, flooding, the climate, that whole tropical climate, it was like a hotbed for diseases and things like that. So the people who lived here first in Louisiana, they were hardcore. They weren't like some people like, oh, I'm going to have a life of ease. These were kind of Native Americans that knew how to survive with the serious elements, because this whole area was like no joke. If you were going to be a Native American and you were living in Louisiana, or what would become Louisiana, you were hardcore. You could take those Texas Native Americans. You'd be like, what? You would be like, seriously, I fight alligators every day. I deal with disease every day. It floods here all the time. I'm always worried about sickness. I'm always worried about mosquitoes. I'm worried about all this kind of stuff. And that means, so from day one, I know I'm going off on a tangent. I do that a lot, so forgive me. So from day one, though, the people of Louisiana have been survivors, and they have been serious people that don't, seriously, no joke, we don't play, and we never have played. To make it in Louisiana, you had to be seriously strong and able to survive. And that wasn't just the men or the heads of tribes. This was everybody. A lot of times in Native American Louisiana, the men would go out to fight each other because they were always battling with different tribes, especially certain ones like the Chitimacha, and we all know about the Apaches and the Comanches. Those weren't too much in Louisiana, but they were right next door in the land that would become Texas. So there was all this arguing and fighting. So guess who had to hold down the fort at home? The ladies. So a lot of times these Native American tribes in Louisiana were matrilineal. What does matrilineal mean? Matrilineal is how I live my life, and I guarantee all of y'all, not all of y'all, but most of y'all live it too. How many of y'all, I want you to be that serious with me, you don't mess with your mama, right? Your mama tells you, boy or girl, get over here. You're going to be jumping to attention. I am almost 40 years old, and if my mother called, well, I no longer, I don't have my mom anymore, but if she called me, for one, I'd be like, what? Screaming, because she was actually calling me. And number two, I would be like, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I don't play with my mama. My mama tells me to do something, or she used to tell me to do something. I was like, yes, ma'am, I'll do what I need to do. My mama told my daddy to do anything, he would be doing it too. And in my household, I run this show. I'm like, I'm the mother. So that is something else that started way back when in Louisiana. It was not something that just happened. Our culture and the way that we are as a people and a community has its roots way back into the very, very beginning of the first people in Louisiana. And that has to go with, number one, like I said, the survival, and number two, the matrilineal lineage. That means matrilineal mother. Patrilineal is father, okay? So think of it like that. That's how it's always going to be. In a lot of these tribes, not all of them, because there are several of them, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit about each one, the mamas were in charge. It was the mamas. It was always like that. And even today, you don't mess with your mama or your grandma or your nanny or anybody else like that. They say what they say goes. And they don't just rule you. They rule all of your friends too, because my mom would say, girls, get in here. And I'm an only child, so my friends would come. They would listen to her too. And I would never, ever think of talking to my mom and not using the words, yes, ma'am, or no, ma'am. I would never, ever think that. So this isn't something that just happened, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. This starts way back when. Another thing that starts way back when with the Native Americans of Louisiana is our resourcefulness, okay? Now, I'm not the greatest cook. In fact, I hate cooking. I do. I have many personal little quirks and queries that I'm sure that I will share with you throughout our time together. By the time you'll be like, Ms. Meyer, you're so insane. Number one, I'm not insane. I'm eccentric. That's another term. I'm Miss Frizzle. I think about that all the time. Mom, I do not like to cook, and I get angry. I'm an angry cook. So when I do have to cook, I let everyone know just how upset I am about the fact that I have to cook. So I'm banging pots and pans around. I'm screaming at everybody, get out of the kitchen, because I hate doing it. But one thing, and it's probably because I live here in Texas and they're not used to good food, they're like, your gumbo is so delicious. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's Zatarans in a box. Truly, it's Zatarans in a box and some chicken and sausage cut up and put in it. But to them, it is like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. And I'm like, oh yeah, you know, just whip that up. It's Zatarans. So, but this is not something, like I said before, this is not something new. The Native American population in the very, very early days of Louisiana was able to use what they had to survive. And one of the things, an example that we can use today, that we see every day, is think about gumbo, okay? When people come to Louisiana, one of the first things they want to do is, where are we going to go eat? Let's go find somewhere to eat. Well, gumbo is a delicacy. Everybody's like, oh, do you know how to make gumbo? I'm like, yeah. It's Zatarans in a box. I was like, do you make your own roux? I didn't even know what that was. I was like, no, I don't. I mean, I didn't know what it was. But gumbo is basically a dish of all kinds of things thrown in. When my aunt would make gumbo, she would put chicken, sausage, andouille. She would put like maybe some, I don't think she put deer in it. She put oysters, she put shrimp, she put anything in it. And she knew how to make her own roux, which she could do that, but I couldn't. And it was delicious. And this wasn't something this was just happened to be something in Louisiana that was brought over, a couple of 100 years ago. This was from the beginning. These Native American women that were here in Louisiana at that time knew how to use what was around them for survival. One of the greatest examples that I can think about, other than food, because, I mean, and even today, I guarantee some of y'all, your mama, your grandma, your mom, whomever, they can go in your pantry or your refrigerator and they can say, okay, I have this, I can make this. Okay, so for real, I don't have that ability. One thing I do eat all the time, and you will always hear this is dead serious, it is on my desk, and it is a giant container of jelly beans. I never ever not have them. I have to hide them from my children because they will eat them on me. And so I do. And my secret hiding spot is, make sure they're not listening, it's in the refrigerator. I put these in an empty coffee can, the big circular ones, and I hide it behind all kind of fruit and vegetables because they never want to eat that, right? And so they never know they're in there. Genius. Don't tell them. Never, ever tell them. It's a secret, okay? So I'm always eating this. This is my lifeline. I always have these. So I'm not going to be anybody going in there and cooking and throwing things together. It's just not going to happen. I'll order pizza or something, whatever, but I will always have the jelly beans. So, but anyway, one of the other things that they did, and this is amazing to me. Like, I would have never have thought that. They would use the alligator. The alligator was big. I mean, still. I mean, even today, look at it. If we didn't control the alligator population, if people out there like the Swamp Brothers or whatever their name are, Swamp People, I don't watch it. I don't know. I just don't watch it. But I know of the show. I hate television. That's another thing. I do not like television. There's nothing on TV that I would want to watch other than Jeopardy. And that's only because I know the answers. But I don't like TV. But anyway, so the Swamp People, how they go and they get those alligators and they control that alligator population because, get out. Get out. Because if they did not, it would be just astronomical. So the Native Americans at this, in early Louisiana, they were controlling it too. They were eating the alligator for one. They used it for meat. They would also use the bones for certain things, and they would use them to make soup and gumbo kind of stuff. They would use the eyes because they were kind of like a delicacy, because your eye, and even an alligator eye, and this is even true for today, is filled with like this fluid, okay? It's like this big fluid, for real. So you ever ate a Cadbury egg? Because I love them. I do like candy. I have a real problem with candy and sweets. And you know how you bite into a Cadbury egg and all that like gooey sweet stuff comes in your mouth? Well, an eyeball is kind of the same way. If they would eat the eyeball, now not all tribes were doing this, but it was some, because they had many different tribes that were living in Louisiana. they would consider that eyeball a delicacy and be like, yeah, I want the eyeball, so it's true. So when you go to eat your candy for Easter and you're eating that Cadbury egg, I want you to think about an eyeball, because it's true. But anyway, one of the coolest things that they would do is they would take the alligator, and after they skinned it, and they use the skin for different things, I mean, they use it for all kinds of things, they would take that fat, they would scrape the fat off of the skin of the alligator. So this is Blue. This is my kitty cat Blue. He's one of the two. So let's pretend that Blue was an alligator. So what they would do is they would, they'd shoot him or something. And then you see how Blue is so fat? He's got a weight problem, but I don't care. I love him regardless. They would skin him, take all this fat. I mean, you can see, watch how fat he is. He's really fat. Do you see how fat he is? He's like, does not want to stay in my lap. So you see, they would take him, all his fat, they scrape it out of his body, and then they would cook it, like make it liquefied. Then what they would do is they would use that liquefied fat as a mosquito repellent, and they would slather it all over themselves every day. So that was just how ingenious they were. That was so unbelievably smart to be able to do that and to figure that out. And you also have to remember, in these Native American cultures in Louisiana, there was not necessarily a written language. You had many different tribal groups that were all existing under one community, and they all spoke kind of different languages. So they had to be able to, understand these things and communicate them to others. So they used something called oral tradition, okay? And we use oral tradition today. Think about it, okay? Think about stories. My kids love to hear about how the day they were born. They love to hear it. I've told them, I have 3 of them, okay? And I've told each one of them about the day they were born numerous times because they love to hear it. And, my mom used to tell me the same kind of thing. And now, like, my mom's Asian, she's Filipino. So she would tell me stories about when my great-grandfather was in the Philippines, and then I tell them to my daughters, and then hopefully, they'll tell them to their daughters, or they'll share the stories of when they were born and all the things that I've told them. And I'm sure that's happened to you too. That's called an oral tradition. You're passing something down orally, because these Native American tribes, most of them at the very, very early onset in Louisiana, did not have a written language or writing things down and handing them over. It was all passed on through oral tradition. And you do that even now. I mean, there are things that you already say, and you tell someone, say, in New Orleans, everything is, my mama said, hey, my mama told me this. You're passing that down through oral tradition. So you're orally, traditionally using communication right now too. So what do we learn so far about Native Americans in Louisiana? Number 1, they were hardcore. They knew how to survive. Number 2, women were fierce. Okay, we were totally fierce. Number 3, they were resourceful. And number 4, they used oral tradition. Now, we've already talked about the matrilineal aspect of these tribes, but now we're going to talk about pretty much religion and culture of them. Now, they were not monotheistic. Most of them were not. Monotheistic is a Latin word, and you have to look at your root word. Mono means one. Mano a mano, that means one person or one something. So when you say they were not monotheistic, that means that they did not have just one God, that they had many gods. So therefore they were polytheistic. And they had not a religion as far as we, most of us are, growing up in Louisiana, we are not totally familiar with. They practiced things kind of like a spirituality, and it was called animism. Now, in animism, if you've ever seen the Disney movie Brother Bear, I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. I've seen every Disney movie because I love Disney World and I love everything Disney, so I've seen them all. So in Brother Bear, it's Kenai, and he's a Native American in around northern Native American, I guess, I don't know, up north somewhere. And what they do is they kind of practice, they show you the practice of animism. He's given like a totem, and his totem is the bear. So, and things like that. That is what animism is. So if you kind of keep thinking about it, because, you know, you've got to recall something to answer a question, or it's back in your mind, you say, oh, what is it? I've heard animism before. Think Brother Bear. The Native American tribes in historic early Louisiana practice this type of spirituality and a religion and a culture. And it's where they worship things like the trees and the earth and animals. And I mean, it was just like a universal worship of their physical element of what was around them. They did not have a spiritual kind of understanding that we, as, you know, present day people necessarily are familiar with. We don't. You know, we think of spirituality, a lot of people, I'm not saying everybody. When I say we, I don't mean everybody. I'm just saying as a over, like, a, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. So when we think about, I said it again. When some of us think of spirituality, we think of a spirit, something that we don't see, especially in New Orleans with all of the spiritual references and the ghost stories and all like that. The Native Americans of early Louisiana did not do this. They were more about your physical presence, what they could see. They worshiped the land. So, you know, and it wasn't like worship, like when we say worship, this was kind of like just gave thanks. They had ritualistic dances, things like that. They did it at certain times, harvest, spring, you know, fall, things like that. They worshiped when the rain came. They had rain dances. So that's kind of the whole spirituality and religious aspect of life in these early tribes in Native American Louisiana. So they were like that, and that was the type of religion. We've already talked about matrilineal, because that was a big thing too. They had many women had a really big role back then. That was a big deal. And what other thing I wanted to cover with you? Oh, in their villages. Here we want to talk about this hunters and gatherers, agriculture, things like that. Okay? So pretty much, well, they did have some that were nomadic. Now, what does it mean to be a nomadic, okay? A nomadic person, like I've called myself a nomad when I was teaching at a brick and mortar school, because I had to constantly move from one place to another. Like, we did not have enough physical areas for all the teachers. So I would go into one room, I'd teach in there, and then I'd pick all my stuff up, and I'd go in another room. So I was a nomad. You're constantly moving. And that means that you can never have anything really permanent, because you'd have to pick up and go. Backpackers that go backpacking through Europe and that go and travel a lot, you can't ever have anything too permanent, because you were having to move at a moment's notice. This summer, I felt like a nomad because I basically lived out of a suitcase and in and out of airport terminals. So I never could really have anything that stayed permanent for a long time, because I knew that I would be doing a lot of traveling. Now, nomads in Louisiana, they moved along with herds, okay? And the reason they didn't do it so much in Louisiana was because there were no big herds that kind of moved throughout the state. The Native Americans that were here at that time, they kind of settled, you know, they settled along the riverfront. They settled in certain areas, because we were not like Wyoming and, you know, Montana, or following herds and things like that. It was pretty much kind of stagnant here. It was static. Static means staying the same. So they didn't have to be nomadic. They could be hunters and gatherers. Now, what does that mean? Because you've probably heard that term many, many times. You're like, what is a hunter and a gatherer? A hunter and a gatherer is someone that hunts during that period. Like, say you've got deer season. Okay, or you know what? My husband doesn't like deer season. He doesn't do that. We don't even really have a lot of deer here in Texas. It's hog season, and I'll refuse to let him bring any kind of hog home. He's never, ever shot one. Never. Even though, you know, he may say he has. He's never. But if he did, I would never allow that to come into my home. I'd be like, oh, no, you can't do that. But anyway, so a hunter and a gatherer would be someone like my husband goes during hog season and goes and hunts with his friends. And let's say he did get a hog or kill a hog or whatever. He would take that hog and he would harvest the meat and he would save it for when it would be harder for survival. Now in Louisiana, we don't have these massive winters and snow where we're not going to be able to go out and, do this. We don't need to have as much of a sustenance as certain other parts of our country did at that time because we don't have major blizzards that everything goes away. I think last winter, I wore my coat one time, just one time. And I mean, it wasn't even that bad. Right now in Dallas, it's like 98 degrees. And that's kind of cool because it was even higher than that. It was really, really high. I'm not even going to tell you how bad my electric bill was, but it was astronomical. And I know of 3 little girls that really got, well, I say little girls, but one of them's older than you that I was very upset with. I'll tell you that. So, but we didn't have that problem of having to kind of survive based on the elements because it was never really that extreme of an element kind of thing. So we were able to go hunt, go get deer or whatever else was in Louisiana, and they were able to keep the meat, eat it, and save late for what was going to be later. They would do the same thing with crops. So they would grow these crops and they would say, okay, well, now what we're going to do is we're going to go cultivate these crops. We're going to take all what we've got, we're going to pack it away, and we're going to save it for later. It was like going to Sam's or Costco. I prefer Sam's. I don't know why. I just do. I rather Sam's. So if I had the choice, and I do have the choice, I always go to Sam's. But so when I go to Sam's, aside from buying the giant tubs of jelly beans, they've got these really this big. I buy them. But what else I buy are things like, I don't know, we eat a lot of chicken in this house. I prefer, I don't know. I like red meat, but I don't like to cook. So I'm like, I'm not going to cook it if it's going to be trash. So I'm like, whatever. So, but we do buy a lot of chicken. So what I'll do is I'll buy this big old portion of chicken because I have a household of 5 people. 5 people, and that's a lot of people. And so I'll take and separate it into little freezer bags, and I'll take one out at a time and cook it. Like, I'm not going to cook the whole thing. For number 1, I don't like to cook. And number 2, I'm not going to sit there and waste a bunch of money. So I put it in these little individual freezer bags, put it in my freezer, and I take one out at a time and cook it as needed. That's exactly what a hunter-gatherer does. Okay? I'm going to go, they go to their Sam's, which is out in the wilderness. They get a big bulk load of stuff, and they separate what they need so that they don't have to go and they won't run out of things. Like me running out of jelly beans would be a travesty in my life. Okay, so I'm always making sure that I've got them. So that's why I have my little bucket here, and I always keep it filled pretty much to the top because I never want to be out of them. So I always I go and hunt my jelly beans, I gather them, and I separate them. As you can see, this is running low, but I do have 2 giant bags hidden so that I can have more, because that's just the way it is. Okay, so they were hunter-gatherers, they were polytheistic, matrilineal, oral tradition, serious people, okay, to be proud of, to be saying this is who we come from. They also were extremely athletic, and you have got to be. I mean, look at Louisiana. We're called the sportsman's paradise. I am not, I like to run long distances. I'm a marathon runner. I'm not going to be playing any sports because I don't like to be dirty. I don't. I will never go hunting. I will definitely never go fishing because I have a really severe fear of fish and frogs. For real. You can ask anybody. It's pretty bad. It's bad. It's like really bad. We would go to the aquarium in New Orleans and I would just walk like a straight line because I didn't want to look at the different animals next to me. It scares me. So, but I'm not going to go hunt and I'm not going to go outside. I rarely do that without serious sun protection. In fact, I have my hat right here because I've got to go outside. I've got to do something, so I'm always putting on my hat because I don't want to be in the sun. So I am not going to be someone, and look how lovely my hair looks. So yeah, like I said, it's pretty bad. Wait, you don't even know. This is Dallas. If I am in Louisiana, it's like this big. So I'm not going to be someone that's going to go outside and do stuff. However, many people in Louisiana do. You're out there, you're riding your 4-wheelers, or you're hunting, or you're fishing, or you're playing soccer, you're doing football. It's a sportsman's, an outdoor person's paradise is what Louisiana is. And that is something that is not new either. This is something that goes way back to the very early people, because Louisiana was a place where you had to survive. This was not a place to come, and this goes forward to the Europeans that start coming over. This was not the place that you would come to kind of rest on your laurels. This was not, you're like, I'm going to Louisiana to relax. I mean, now I guess people do, but back then, there was no relaxing here. It got so bad to the point of when the French had control of Louisiana, they were kidnapping people to get them to come here because life was so hard here. No one wanted to come. So they started kidnapping people and sending them here to colonize Louisiana. So we're going to get to that later. But right now, these Native Americans that were living here in Louisiana, these were not, you know, your type of just laid back, easygoing people. These were survivors. Okay, so remember that. And pretty much it. All I really want you to know other than that is that we had 6 different language groups, and you can see, if you go in your book, you can look on page 74. This is your historic Native American groups. They were kind of like broken down like this. And each group lived off of that land and that area that they were living in Louisiana. So if you had a Native American group that's living down here towards the very bottom, down to your New Orleans area, Plaquemines, Shell Beach, all those kind of things, Delacroix, they were living pretty much in the swamp area. They were living in, based on that, the Mississippi, the Gulf of Mississippi and the Mississippi River. You had people way up here and over in like the Shreveport area. They weren't so much living off of the Gulf of Mississippi because it was already down here. So they were focusing on what they had, what resources they had. But we all had access to the Mississippi River. It was just, you know, right here, pretty much, you know, it's flowing through. And we had, you know, a communication with other tribes. Now, other tribes did not always get along. Now, you can think about that when you think about high school rivalries or, you know, whatever rivalries. When I was in high school, I went many moons ago, way before you guys were born. I went to Archbishop Hannon, and when it was in Miro, down in Chalmette in St. Bernard Parish. And our biggest rival at that time was Chalmette High. We were both in St. Bernard Parish. We were both existing in Chalmette area. Hannon was in Miro, but, you know, the same kind of thing. But there was this rivalry between us. So but we were still united in being from the parish. Same thing goes here. You had these Native Americans that were united as they were living in this whole area that would become Louisiana, but there still was discrepancies between the different little areas. I mean, I know that all the time. Trust me, okay? Everybody at the school knows that there are 2 teachers from Chalmette. The rest of them are not. And Wit is like, oh, those teachers from Chalmette, they're all over the place. But, you know, honestly, we're the best. Go Chalmatians, right? But, you know, it's all in good fun. But back then it really wasn't. I mean, there was a lot of fighting, and there could be lots of damage done because of the differences in culture and in beliefs and in the way that things ran. So Louisiana, like I said before, was not necessarily, you know, a pleasant place to live back then. It really wasn't. It was like Bear Gillis, whatever his name is, the guy that's like goes and runs all over and tries to survive. It was a fight for survival here. And that's one of the ways that we have become such an interesting people. I don't want anyone in this class to ever say Louisiana history is boring, or history is boring in general, because it's not. Louisiana history in particular is nothing more than a huge soap opera type of drama. History in general is, but Louisiana for sure. We have got corruption. We've got some seriously crazy stuff that goes on. Wait till we start talking about Huey Long and Earl Long, who was our governor at one time, whose wife had him committed to a mental institution because he was kind of nutty. We also have the craziness of survival tactics of changing hands between the French and the Spanish and the British and the Americans. We had all this fighting going on. Jean Lafitte, one of our favorite famed heroes that we've got was a serious murderous pirate. Andrew Jackson's wife came over here with Andrew Jackson during the War of 1812 and said, Andrew, I'm out. I am not staying in this place because it's like Sodom and Gomorrah. We as a state have a most colorful, unique, and just interesting history from day one. And it's going to get even better as we go along. I promise you, this class is going to be the most fun that you've ever had in history. And I guarantee you will say, I love history after this. Because nothing that happens in this book here, okay? You don't have to be like me, because I'm a little, like I said, we don't use crazy, we use eccentric.
She's our friend and she's crazy.
I'm eccentric and I'm like, love what I'm doing. I love what I'm teaching. I'm all excited about it. But this book is nothing but a huge drama. You've got action and adventure. You've got romance. You've got tragedy. You've got, all kinds of terrible things that happen, or even good things and interesting things, all within Louisiana history. So I promise you, don't miss this class. I mean, I'm supposed to miss it anyway, but don't miss it. Watch these episodes. And come to class and work with me, and I promise you, you're going to love it. You're going to have a great year. So until next time, this is Miss Meyer with the Miss Meyer Show. Please look for the code word that's down here. You need to put the code word into the code word quiz, and you do get points. That way, I know that you watched the video, because it is content, and it's a quiz grade. So do it. Put your code word in. For real, do it. And I will see you guys next time on the next episode of the Miss Meyer Show.